Welcome to the Left of Str8 Show, where we talk entertainment, music, books, foodies, and more each week with special guest interviews of interest to the LGBTQ community and our straight allies. Direct from the entertainment capital of Northeast Ohio. Your host, Scott Fullerton, chats with some of your favorite entertainers, celebrities, newsmakers, and behind-the-scenes people across the country and around the world who make it all happen. So sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and let's start talking.
Everyone, welcome back to the Left of Str8 Show, the podcast that brings you fun and insightful interviews with prominent figures from the worlds of entertainment, foodies, literature, music, and advocacy. Just for our LGBTQ community and straight allies, of course. I'm your host, Scott Fullerton. Today, I have a very special guest joining us. He's a Hollywood historian with a wealth of knowledge and captivating stories to share. Tony Maietta is a renowned Hollywood historian who's dedicated his career to unraveling the fascinating history of the silver screen. With his deep passion for cinema and meticulous research, Tony's become an authoritative voice in the industry. Throughout his career, Tony has delved into the archives, unearthing forgotten gems and preserving the legacies of legendary actors, directors, and film studios. And his extensive expertise spans across various eras, allowing him to connect the dots and paint a vivid picture of Hollywood's evolution over time. As a frequent contributor to publications and documentaries, Tony has shared his insights with audiences around the globe, and his commitment to accuracy and his ability to breathe life into historical narratives have made him a trusted source for anyone seeking a deeper understanding of the silver screen's rich history. I'm excited to have him on the Left of Str8 Show for the very first time. Please welcome Mr. Tony Maietta. Tony, how are we doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well, Scott. Thank you for that intro. Who wrote that? That's great. Can
I do my research, my friend.
Can I put it on my website? I love it. That's great. Thank you.
You are a well-accomplished human being, my friend, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. How's everything going?
I'm happy to do it.
Downtown La La Land.
You know, The Sun just came out. Now, I don't know if you remember about May Gray and June Gloom, but I mean, it's unreal this year. It's just, we had no sun at all yesterday. And today it just came out at 2:00. I mean, it's, you know, with Southern California, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to complain, but maybe I will a little bit, yeah. But other than that, everything's great. I'm excited to talk to you this afternoon. This is going to be fun.
I'm excited to talk to you as well. I mean, we have, I told you off air that we have similar yet opposite stories. Yeah. You were born out here in Northwestern PA and moved to LA to pursue your entertainment dream. I was born and raised in Southern California and have been, like I say, banished to Northeast Ohio to do an entertainment podcast of all things. Talk to me about growing up. Where did you grow up here? What kind of kid were you and what got you into the entertainment?
Well, wow. Well, I was born in a little town called Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is about 90 miles north of Pittsburgh, 30 miles, pretty close to Erie, Lake Erie, as we talked about, the beautiful lake. Yeah, and I was, what kind of a kid was I? I was, you know, I think I was probably not stereotypical, but your typical fat gay boy. You know what I mean? I was not good at sports. I could feel that, you know. I got along pretty well with everybody. I really didn't. Fortunately, I didn't deal with much harassing and bullying at that time. It wasn't like it is now. You know, if I did, I wasn't going to be shot. So it's a much scarier time. But I got along well with people, and I was funny. You know, I did that thing where I learned that, you know, if you're funny, you know. And plus I just, my refuge was theater, you know, like it's so textbook, isn't it? But, you know, I wanted to be an actor. I fell in love with, Mary Tyler Moore, Lucille Ball. My very first memory of life, actually, I always say is the first episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. But then I realized that was starting to age me. So I said, well, you know what? No, it was Nick at Night on Mary Tyler. It's TV Land, but I mean, anyway. I would always move it up. But I was just enthralled with Lucy and Mary and All in the Family and all those great 70s sitcoms. And I just went into theater, and I came to Los Angeles right out of college. I went to school in Pittsburgh and graduated and came right to LA because I was going to be, I was going to have a sitcom within a year. I knew it. I was sure of it. I have my own sitcom in a year. I remember saying it to my friend when we drove out. And, I'll have my first Emmy, probably 2 years, 3 years. So, yeah, didn't quite happen that way. But I did make my first job was on the Golden Girls, which was exciting. It was my favorite show. As most people, I watched it when they actually aired. I think it's so funny to these kids who love it now and watch it on Hulu or Destiny. I'm like, I watched it Saturday nights at 9, and I had to sit through commercials. So that was really exciting for it to be my first job. And I thought, here we go, we're going. So it's been interesting. I mean, I had some success as an actor, but my mother always told me that I was a writer. And I always said, no, I'm an actor. And she said, no, you're a writer. You're a writer. They were very supportive of me. But the moral of the story here is listen to your mother. Because, 25 years later, I'm a writer. And so it's been kind of a circuitous route to my career, but it's been one that's certainly been filled with adventures. Yeah.
Wouldn't life be easier if we all listened to our mothers at one time? But that's not going to happen.
I'm telling you, kids, listen to your mother. She was right. I don't regret any of the things I did when I was acting. I did some really cool stuff and met a lot of cool people. But, when something is right for you, and I still might occasionally act. I'm still, I haven't totally left it. Doing what I do now is a form of acting. When I'm doing these documentaries where I'm interviewing people, I'm playing the interviewer or I'm playing the film historian. The first time anyone called me a film historian, I was like, I'm not a film historian. What does that mean? But then I went, well, I will pretend to be a film historian. And, I play a film historian. So it's all part of it. It's all part of the same genre, we're all doing the same thing, basically.
Right. And they ended up creating a couple of channels dedicated just film history. So yeah,
right. I remember when TCM started. It was incredible. I was so excited, and I loved it. Still love it. Robert Osborne, excuse me, was a friend. I'm confident to say he was a friend, a mentor. I mean, I worked with him, and he certainly advised me, which was wonderful. He was a great man, and I miss him. I think everybody misses him, especially people, who love old movies, because he knew, you said on the intro, my fabulous intro, you said, knowledge. Oh, that guy. I mean, I could say Louise Reiner to him, and he'd go off for, 20 minutes about something. And I would it's astounding to me. He's missed, but yeah.
I love that. And I'm sure he is. We need to talk about, we're celebrating Pride Month right now. And I always ask first-time guests, when did you kind of first come out to yourself? Who was the first person you told? And when do you feel you finally started to find your tribe, maybe?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I always knew. So I guess I came out to myself when I realized what it meant to be gay. Right. I mean, it was just never a question in my mind. The first person I came out to, that's a tough one. I must have been, well, here's the thing. I always knew it, but then I went to a performing arts school. I went to a theater school. And if you're going to come out of performing arts school because, 90%. But I was in the closet when I was in college. And I looked back at that and I was like, if I was going to come out anywhere, it would have been, here where everybody, but I didn't. I eventually came out, I think my senior year of college with a good friend of mine. And of course, he's like, I know, everybody knows, Tony. I mean, come on, who are you fooling? You got Streisand posters and this is a performing arts school and you have Funny Girl. I mean, come on. So yeah, I did that. I went up to my first gay bar in Pittsburgh, a place called Zach's 4th Avenue, which is no longer there, unfortunately. It was such a cool place. But I of course, had to get drunk before I went into the bar, which seems counterintuitive. But And I walked in and ran right into my music teacher, my voice teacher, and I was like horrified. And my friend I was with said, "He's here too. What are you, Tony, again, performing arts college?" So yeah.
I love it. That's
Yeah,
so
it was a pretty quick process. And then when I moved to California, the cat was, I told everybody, it was the thing to do. So
very nice, very nice. Well, I have so many things I want to talk to you about because we are similar in age. We have that same background about Golden Girls and Maude and Mary Tyler Moore and everything. I was right there with you watching them live the entire time.
mhm.
Lucille Ball was amazing to me. The Barrymores, I studied film and everything, and you've done a
Oh,
great profile on
thank you.
them and Drew that I thought was just amazing. But let's kind of keep on the Pride theme for a bit.
Sure.
I want you to talk to me about how Hollywood's portrayal of LGBT issues and personalities have kind of evolved over the years, and what do you think its impact's kind of been?
Well, I mean, in our lifetime, we've seen the spectrum. I mean, come on. When when I moved to Hollywood to look for work as an actor, you couldn't be honest about who you were. I had managers, I had agents who said, "You got to play it straight," and because you couldn't work otherwise, you couldn't get jobs. And I'm talking about television, not theater. I'm talking about mainstream television. And in that time when you had I remember Tony Randall did a show, I think in the 80s, called Love, Sydney. And I think that might have been the first time a lead character was gay, but they didn't say he was gay. I mean, I don't mean Paul Lynde and Charles Nelson Riley. I mean, they were kind of like wink, wink. But this character, but they didn't really say he was. But I remember that, and I remember that being kind of interesting. And then, there were occasionally the episodes like of the Golden Girls with Blanche's brother being gay. And then the gays became kind of like the pet. We're going to do a very special episode with a gay character who's not the main character in the show, of course. He's visiting, so he doesn't have to, make people uncomfortable. So there were those. And then, I think Will and Grace just, blew it wide open. I mean, when I think about the gay characters that are on TV now, and nobody thinks twice about it, and that kiss that Jack and Will had on Will and Grace on the Today Show. I remember that episode where they kissed, and it was like the first, male kiss, I think, on TV. It's just astounding to me. It's just astounding how far we've come, how far we still have to go. I mean, when I moved out here, I'm trying to remember if there were any out working actors. I don't think there were. I may be wrong about that, but I don't think there were. And, now the fact that we have, Matthew Bomer and of course, Neil Patrick Harris and these guys who are working, and they're not just playing gay parts. You know what I mean? They're playing exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, there's, what's his name? The guy, Jonathan Bailey from Bridgerton. I mean, this is an out and proud gay man, and he plays all kinds of characters, and that's really astounding, considering that you couldn't have done that when I moved out here. So it's pretty remarkable. I still think we have a long way to go. We're in a very tricky time right now. We're getting it's a very difficult time right now. We're getting a lot of weird things happening that I don't think anybody was I didn't expect it. I thought once marriage equality passed that we were just going to keep going forward. And now we've got some, we're under attack. This community is under attack in so many ways. And I live in a bubble, so I'm very fortunate. But I mean, even in your state, I lived in Cleveland for a while. I could feel it, and so I give props and I give credit to people who are in these areas that are specifically under attack and that are living their lives and, and proud of it. And, I don't know if I can say this on your podcast, but, fuck you for it's not your business, So I have to give them props for that. Amazing.
And then this story, I'm sure you've seen the curve, and I think I even saw you talk about in an interview once with the Advocate that back in the day it was kind of okay to be gay a little bit, as long as you didn't really talk about it, right? So we've gone through that pendulum of some people kind of in a well-known secret, and then you had to hide it again exclusively. Now it's gotten really deep, right?
Well, if you were an actor, if you were a director, or if you were a writer, or God knows if you were a costume designer, or you did one of those jobs, it was like, you're okay, just don't, George Cukor, one of the greatest directors of the golden era, if you will, was pretty open about his homosexuality, but he was very circumspect. He knew what he could do and he couldn't do. He wasn't going out picking up sailors, or if he was, he wasn't getting arrested. So he was living as a gay man, but don't publicize it. And he also made films under budget, so they love that. As long as you brought your film in, you got under budget, they didn't care. Now, actors, obviously, movie stars, totally different. You couldn't, I don't have to bring up Rock Hudson. He's textbook of what they had to go through at that time in order to have successful careers as leading men. There were character actors such as Clifton Webb who were gay and pretty open about it, but nobody had a poster of Clifton Webb. Well, maybe some people did. I don't want to say that. There could be some interesting people out there who did. But I mean, Rock Hudson was Rock Hudson, so he couldn't, there's a lot. Tab Hunter, same thing. I mean, the subterfuge and the smoke and mirrors they had to throw up were crazy. In some ways it's still there, I got to tell you. I mean, there's a lot more gay actors in Hollywood than are out and gay. And it's still not, there's a long way to go. That's the thing to say. That's the thing to say.
Well, you did a great job as host back on Here TV. Talk to me about what was one of your favorite stories you did on there, and what was maybe one of your most surprising finds, because you did great research on something.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I can't believe, did you see that on my YouTube channel, right? Because I don't think you can, is Here TV still exist anymore? I don't even know. Thank you. That was a while. That was a while ago.
Some things firsthand.
I still haven't seen some of those. The last one. I haven't gotten paid for some of them either. But welcome to gay television. There were some fun stories that I had. A lot of mine, they weren't necessarily gay. I think the funniest one was we did this movie called Hands Across the Table with Fred McMurray and Carol Lombard. And I talked about Fred McMurray a little bit. And I heard this from Barry Livingston, so I know this is true. And I interviewed Barry Livingston, who was one of the three sons. He was Ernie on My Three Sons. And I interviewed him for one of the Lucy Show DVDs. And this story didn't make it on the air, but he told it to me, and I just thought it was such a great story, was that Fred McMurray was very well known. First of all, Fred McMurray in the 40s was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, which is kind of mind-boggling. Fred McMurray? Really? That's weird. Yeah, kind of crazy. But he was very popular, but he was also known to be very curmudgeonly, ornery, particularly by the time he did My Three Sons. The man just didn't want to work. And they wanted him to do My Three Sons. He wanted to do those Disney movies, but they wanted him to do the sitcom because it was so easy. So, okay, he said he would do My Three Sons. But they had to film all of his scenes first in the series. And then he would be done in about 3 months. And then they would film the rest of the scenes without him. Well, so everything, of course, you had to have an entire year's full of scripts written. You had to know who your guest stars were going to be, if they were going to be with Fred McMurray. So can you imagine? But they did it for him because he was Fred McMurray. But the problem was that he would do all his scenes, be done in 3 months, and then he'd be off. The actors had to react to him in the 2 shots, but he wasn't there. So the actors would have to do their scenes with Fred McMurray to a coat rack. Which, if you knew Fred McMurray is not that much different doing to Fred McMurray. But I just thought Barry Livingston was like, yeah, we used to have to pretend this coat rack was Steve Douglas. I just thought that was so funny. I mean, only in Hollywood,
Oh, God, that's hilarious.
That was one of my favorite stories.
That is so funny. Like I said, you do some great research just because the questions of the things I've asked, I think, are amazing. My research, and I got to tell you before I forget about it, is my probably favorite interview with you was on The Good Vanilla because I'm a huge Nick fan. And give me an introduction because I love
Mr. Kachanoff. Well, I am a fan of Mr. Kachanoff. Let me tell you right now.
We're going to
Total.
have you back and just be a foodie talk one day.
So I would love that. I would love that.
Talk about food all day long.
I'm a total fanboy. And it's funny because I said it to him because I didn't know him. I was doing research. I was supposed to do this documentary on supporting actresses, and Eileen Brennan, God, talk about a genius supporting actress. God rest her soul. And I was just doing an internet deep dive, and I came across this podcast he does with Colin, Best Supporting Podcast. And they did one on her, and I was just blown away by them. I mean, talk about research and the depth of their knowledge. It was fantastic. So then when Nick announced on the podcast that he was going to do The Good Vanilla, I nearly lost my mind because I remember, again, it's like watching Mary Tyler Moore live. I remember coming home from work after some horrible, horrible temp job and putting on the Food Network, and Ina was on, and she was just like, she just calmed me down. I loved it. So we bonded over that. And then he asked me to be on the show, which was so much fun. Because that's a fun episode that we did, the Halloween.
I listened to the whole thing. I mean, usually I do little bits and pieces, but I loved every second of it. I'm the same way. When I started the show 8 years ago now. And I would start primarily, it was all about entertainment, foodies, and books for my first three big things, because I would watch all the food competitions, and I'd have a lot of the competitors from the different spring bake-offs and the network stars on the show and everything. And then I'm a huge Ina fan, and I have never used chocolate scents without having a little bit of coffee grinds to it and everything. So
yeah, she's great. Whenever I go to East Hampton, I stalk her house. I just want to get in. I just want to see that barn, which is bigger than my entire house. So, yeah,
exactly right.
It's great. I
love that you saw it. We'll have a foodie interview sometime and just talk food one time.
That'd be fun. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That place podcasts are. He's a really great guy. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of his.
Nice. I am as well. All right, let's kind of jump into the outside of being the LGBTQ world. Some of your work that you've done. Which era of Hollywood do you think has some of the most interesting history for it? What have you really enjoyed looking into?
Oh, wow. Well, there was an era in Hollywood from 1929 till 1934 called the PreCode Era. And what it was there was always, since the 20s, there was a production code. And what the production code was basically a rules of do's and don'ts. You can't open mouth kissing, homosexuality, all this stuff. But it wasn't enforced because there had been a lot of scandals in the 20s and people were threatening to boycott films. So the producers got together and said, we have to do something about this. So they made this kind of loosey-goosey kind of, rules and regulations, but nobody paid any attention to it. And then talkies came in and the crash came in. And there was a real financial threat to the movies. I mean, the movies did okay for a while, but then they started to feel depression too. So directors and producers began pushing the limits even further, and had some really licentious, salacious films were made during this era. From 1929, when sound came in, until 1934. And by 1934, the Catholic Church in particular, the religious right, if you want to call it that, if you use a term from today and put it back there, had it. And the Catholics in particular threatened some real boycotts. They would tell people from the pulpit, don't go see this film. And, there are a lot of Catholics in the world who go to the movies, especially then, and that could really affect the box office. So this new production code was created, and it absolutely went into effect. That's why after 1934, you don't see people sleeping in the same bed. You see single people and married couples in single bed. You don't see homosexuality. And if you do, it's usually some deep, sinister character, like, and it's never said, but like Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca, that kind of a thing. And, films were basically sanitized. But the period before then, that really golden period between 29 and 34, has some of the craziest, most insane movies. And I don't know about you, but I was brought up watching movies on TV, and there were no pre-code movies. There was Andy Hardy, there was, which are wonderful. There was Mimi in St. Louis. I love them. But to see a black and white film, like, for example, Babyface, which is Barbara Stanwyck, which is probably the one that really pushed the Catholic Church over the edge. Because in this film, Babyface, this is 1933, I believe. Please don't hate me if I got that date wrong. I believe it's 32 or 33. Barbara Stanwyck basically plays this young girl from Erie, Pennsylvania, by the way, who literally sleeps her way up the corporate ladder. She starts out as basically her father has prostituted her in Erie, in this seaside town or this lakeside town. She escapes. They're riding the rails in this boxcar and they get caught. And she basically takes the guy in the back in the shadows and does what she needs to do to him in order not to be thrown off the train. She gets into the big city, which we assume is New York. And the camera like pans. She starts at the bottom. She goes to the mailroom, and then she goes to the next one and the next one. In every series of the way, every time she sleeps with somebody, the camera goes up to the next level. And then she has these adventures, and she seduces this guy, and it goes up to the next until she's rich. And she's owns the world basically, and she doesn't get punished. Now, this is how crazy these movies are. The woman who literally sleeps her way to the top and doesn't get punished. So these pre-code movies are bananas, and they're so much fun. And I really urge people, who to stream or to watch TCM, when you see something that they call a pre-code, watch it, because I guarantee you, it's going to blow your mind, the things they do. It's a lot of fun. That's probably the most interesting era to me.
I love that. That's a great answer. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Are there any lesser known films or actors from the past that you think deserve more recognition that might have gotten looked over in the past?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite actresses is an actress named Jean Arthur. Now, Jean Arthur was a big star. She did a lot of Frank Capra. She did Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. She did You Can't Take It With You. She was a big Capra person. She did Only Angels Have Wings with Cary Grant and George Stevens. But my favorite film of hers is a film called The More the Merrier, which is this little gem from 1943. And Jean Arthur, I mean, she's well known, but she's not Betty Davis well known. She's not Katharine Hepburn well known. People who love actresses and love movies know Jean Arthur, but I've always thought that Jean Arthur was underappreciated because she was so very funny and so very touching. She looked a little bit like the actress Mary Martin, the Broadway actress Mary Martin. She had that she was like a petite blonde, but she had this voice that was kind of a cross between a croak and a foghorn. And it was just this wonderful voice. And she's just luminous in these films. Wow. And she did her last film, her final film was Shane. I believe it was Shane. And then she retired. She did some theater, but she was a troubled person. And she just was not happy as an actress, and so she retired. So I really feel like, she's somebody that really needs to be appreciated and rediscovered. That's just, the first one that comes to the top of my head is Jean Arthur. Because I adore Jean Arthur. And her films are easy to find. Cool. Frank Capra.
Right, last time I'll have you put on your historian hat, but as a historian, what advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers and actors that want to kind of learn from the past that you think might help contribute to today's film industry?
Oh, they absolutely should learn their film history. Absolutely. That drives me crazy when young actors don't know who George Stevens was, who George Cukor was, or they say George Cukor, which also drives me crazy. It's Cukor. People who don't know, who have never seen a screwball comedy, who don't know who Howard Hawks is. Come on. If you're going to go into an industry, you're going to go into a business, know what you're doing. Part of your job is to learn from the people behind you. You can't get a better comedic performance than Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant in Bringing Up Baby. You cannot. Now, it's screwball, so it's a different style. But if you want to know what a screwball comedy is, you watch Bringing Up Baby. You can't get a better dramatic performance from an actress than Katharine Hepburn in just about anything. But you can't get a better dramatic performance than Katharine Hepburn in Long Day's Journey into Night. You can't get a better dramatic performance than Elizabeth Taylor in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. My God, nobody thought this woman could do this. Everybody, there were real, she was, first of all, she was way too young for the part, but there was so much bad feelings about her doing this part. And it is a brilliant, brilliant film performance. A brilliant film performance. You can't get better than she and Montgomery Clift in A Place in the Sun. I mean, I could go on and on with this. It's so important to learn particularly for film acting, because we can't, unfortunately, I wish we could, go back in a time machine and see Angela Lansbury do Mame, or see Uta Hagen do Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which I would love. There's a record of it. But when I was studying theater, I would listen to these tapes. I would listen to the recordings they made, because they did make them. And there's one of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the entire production, which is just mind-blowing. There's one of Boys in the Band, which is also incredible to hear. It's your business to learn, to learn from them. And how better to learn than to watch a movie? I mean, hello. I was an insurance rep for a while. I did claims, and how silly was that job? I'm like, can't think of anything more antithetical to my personality than going into a body shop and trying to assess damage. But in a car, I'm like, it's so dirty. I don't know. I can't see anything. And you lose a lot of credibility when you go into a body shop and you call a roof a hood and a hood a roof. I mean, it's just like, anyway. But I was living in Cleveland, and I needed to work, so I worked for this insurance company, and I had to learn things, that just like would make my mind melt. I couldn't fathom it. But actors, you're watching a movie, you're reading a play. Is there anything better to read than a play? I mean, Streetcar Named Desire. I mean, I read it once a year because come on. So yeah, I got a little bit of soapboxy there, but it really bothers me. It bothers me as a historian. It bothers me as an actor when actors don't know their history. When actors don't know they better know who Betty Davis is. I had a date once with this guy. This guy, he didn't know who Betty Davis was, and that was the end of it. I was like, yeah, it's been a great date. Bye. Yeah.
Well said. I appreciate you doing that, and I love your perspective from that, because you've studied it all, and like I said, you do such great research. I want to go into some of your own personal projects. I want to start, like I said, I'm a huge Lucy fan. You did a whole retrospective of the Lucy show. Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, and I just want to show them on screen, handsome as ever, right next to Lucy Arnaz there. So let's go ahead and play that for my listeners, and then we will come back on the other side and talk about that and the rest of your illustrious, I almost said illicit career.
Illicit career. Well, some people would say, yeah, that's appropriate.
There we go. Yeah. All right, guys. This is my guest today, Mr. Tony Maietta. We're talking about one of his interviews with the great Lucy Arnaz. We'll be back on the side.
It was great training, and the best training was the people that we worked with, the other guest stars. First of all, my mother's there, and Vivian Vance is there. Hello, Gail Gordon. They're like the three best actor people, comedy, and believable, so believable all the time that if you didn't do what they were doing, it would be very obvious very quickly that you're being fake. So you're setting the bar very high when you work with those people.
Well, let me ask you, you bring up Vivian Vance and Gail Gordon, and of course, one of the reasons this season is so special to Lucy fans is the great interplay between Lucy Carmichael and Vivian Bagley, between your mother and Vivian Vance. Obviously, it's almost like a continuation of I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
And I know that Vivian Vance was a great mentor of yours, if that's the right word. Can you tell us a little bit about what Vivian inspired in you and what Vivian suggested or counseled you with?
Viv knew that I really enjoyed theater. I mean, for me, working on my mother's show was just more theater. But when I would go home, I had a little stage in my backyard, and I always was putting on plays. I never really thought about going into film. I wasn't where my heart was at somehow. I mean, my mother's show was filmed, but it felt like a theater piece to me. We rehearsed it, and we had a studio audience, and we did it from beginning to end. We didn't stop and do things out of context like they do in movies and one-camera shows, And when I picked my high school, because it had a great theater department, and Vivian just always encouraged me to keep doing that, so that I could go there one day. And even later when we were on the Here's Lucy show, that's really when she began mentoring me, not just the Lucy show. But she would guest star on the Here's Lucy show from time to time, and she would come and say, so what do you do on your hiatuses? You know, are you getting back to the theater? And I went, well, no, they're only, 4 weeks, something like that. I usually just go on vacation somewhere. She goes, girl, I said, don't you get typecast as some sitcom performer all your life and never be able to get back on the stage. I thought, what are you talking about? I mean, you're Ethel Mertz.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're Ethel Mertz.
You're Ethel Mertz, like for your whole life. I get it. I see. And she came from the theater. Vivian came from doing dramatic parts as well as comedy parts. I found her doing Voice of the Turtle in San Diego. And she was absolutely right. So I did immediately, started auditioning for summer stock and got into the theater again.
All righty, we are back. That was a clip from my guest today, Tony Maietta, who fantastic interviews. Tell me about, I love Lucy. You guys did a retrospective like the entire show.
Right.
We're talking about doing all these great interviews. You've had a huge career doing lots of these. What was some of your favorite?
Well, that was an incredible experience. That whole thing. What it was the Lucy show, Lucille Ball's second series, was being put out on DVD. And so back in the glory days when DVDs existed and when there were extras, people like me could get jobs, but it's not like now. We have to create other things. So anyway, they hired me, CBS hired me to interview people who were involved in the Lucy show, which was, I did the first 3 seasons. And then, this was 2010. I think we did the first one. The last one was in 2012. The Lucy show was 1960. So most of those people, unfortunately, were no longer with us. Right. So it was difficult. We were running out of people to talk to. When my producer said he thought he wanted to talk to the babies who played Little Ricky, not Keith Thibodeau. I'm talking about the baby when Lucy comes home from the hospital. And he wanted to talk to them. And I was like, I think I see the writing on the wall with this. That never happened. He's a great guy, though. He's a wonderful guy.
Jumped the shark moment right there.
Yeah, I was like, I think we've run out of gas here, ladies and gentlemen. But we did. How do you pick between? Lucy. Well, first of all, Lucy Arnaz. Can you imagine? I've loved Lucy. Lucy was the first. Lucy was my first, and Lucy IE was my first. Lucy was my first obsession as a little boy. She was my friend. I would come home from school and I'd spend a half an hour with Lucy and Viv, my 2 best friends. So to talk to Lucy IE about Lucy Y, it was kind of like meeting the Pope's Junior. It was just like, wow. That was you can't forget your first time. So there'll always be a very special place in my heart for that. And she was so funny and so warm, and she still is. I just saw her not too long ago, unfortunately, at Carol Cook's memorial. Carol Cook, who I interviewed in season 2, who was 99 years old when she passed away in January. And Lucy was just as funny and sharp, and she's her mother's daughter. I didn't know her mother. I was unfortunately, Lucy died 3 months after I moved to LA. So I was like, well, at least she waited for me to get here. I did see her at the Oscars, her very last public appearance I saw. But so speaking with Lucy about that was just a surreal dream come true moment. So there's that. And the Carol Cook interview, which was on season 2, was one of the most raucous, hysterical experiences. My face still hurts from laughing. The world lost a huge thing with Carol Cook, because Carol Cook was so brilliant. Even up to, she was sharp at the end. I saw her. Del Shores, my boyfriend, went to dinner with her and her husband Tom, who's still around, in November, just 3 months before she died, 2 months before she died. Still sharp as a tack, still biting, still incisive wit. But boy, that interview, I literally had to. I was laughing so hard, but I didn't want to. I couldn't laugh. I'm interviewing. I couldn't be like I had to hold it. I had to contain it. Probably a little too much. I wish I'd let go a little bit, but the final story she tells, which I'd heard her tell before, and I said, she has to tell this story. You have to keep it in, of when she was mistaken for Lucy at a Rite Aid, and how she dealt with it. It's just genius. Her timing, the way she paused, the way she looked at the pro. We lost a real gem when we lost Carol Cook.
So true.
And a funny, wonderful lady.
Well, I'm going to encourage my listeners to check a lot of your YouTube videos. I don't believe that one's on there, but we'll give your site later.
They're all on my YouTube channel, because people don't have DVDs anymore, so all of my Lucy Show stuff is on my YouTube channel, which is Tony Maietta. It's my name. So yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about, we talked about earlier that you're in your writing phase now, and you did this fantastic work, The Marble Faun of Grey Gardens, with the Marble Faun himself, Jerry Torrey.
Jerry Torrey.
That had to be an amazing experience. Talk about that. We've had such obsession with the Eddies over the years. What was your first kind of introduction to that, and how did you get involved with that project?
Well, Grey Gardens, gosh, I've lived with Grey Gardens for so long, I feel like I was there. Living it through Jerry and just everything. My first introduction to Grey Gardens was not that dramatic. I was a video store. And I say this in the book. I was in this particular, I've always loved documentaries. And I was at Video West in Studio City, where I worked for a while. I wasn't working then. Me working in a video store, it was like perfect, ideal job. And I was looking for a documentary, and I went up to the clerk, and I said, or the person who was checking people out. I don't want to call him a clerk, but and I said, "Can you recommend any documentaries?" And he said, "Have you ever seen Grey Gardens?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And he immediately went to the shelf, got the DVD, and put it in my hands. And he said to me, and I'll quote, he said, "Once you meet little Edie, your life will never be the same." And boy, truer words were never spoken, because I saw that film and I was absolutely, as the Brits say, gobsmacked, for the reason that everybody is. These women who speak like Tennessee Williams heroines, just, day-to-day life, who are so eloquent and so aristocratic, living amongst cat feces and cat food cans and God knows what else. It's just mind-boggling. And I knew I had to do something with it, but I didn't know what. So I was working with a writing partner at the time, and we were actually working on a book about the Maisel brothers, who made Grey Gardens. They're the filmmakers who made Grey Gardens. And we were in New York. And Albert, who was alive at the time, obviously, was introducing a screening of Grey Gardens at the Met. So we're sitting at the Met, and I hear this commotion behind me, and this guy comes bounding down the aisle before the film starts while Albert's talking. And I looked over and I said to my friend, I said, "I think that's Jerry." And he went, No, Jerry's dead." Well, he got to Albert, and he wasn't rushing the stage. Albert introduced him, and it was Jerry. So he wasn't dead. And he talked for a little bit before, and then we watched the movie. And afterwards I said, "Can I talk to you? Can we talk to you sometime tomorrow? We're in town for a few days. And I'd love to interview you for this Maisel project." Well, we went to a diner the next day, and I think we must have been there for 4 hours. Jerry had one story more fantastic than the next one. It was just insane. And I just thought to him, "Did you ever think about writing these down?" Because his perspective, he's the last man standing from this Grey Gardens adventure. And he said, "I've always wanted to, but I'm not a writer. I can't do it." And I thought, well, I am. So I kind of filed that away. And then for one reason or another, the book project didn't work out. And I was living in New York full time. And I went to see Christine Ebersol at Birdland, which is this great cabaret space in Midtown. And since Christine Ebersol had played Little Edie and Big Edie in the musical Grey Gardens, Jerry was there. And we reconnected. And I said, "Let's write that book." So it took us, I got to tell you, that was like 2012, and the book came out in 2017, 2018. It was a long process. It's not War and Peace. I mean, it's not a huge book, but Jerry, the wonderful thing about Jerry is that he's so eager to tell his stories that it's hard to keep him on track. He would start telling me one story about the time that Jackie Kennedy showed up at the house. And the next thing I know, he'd be talking about Edie going out with Howard Hughes. And I'd be like, wait, no, let's keep it. First of all, wow, let's put a pin in that. But let's get back to Jackie. So, I mean, so I had to really tell him, to imagine that he was telling me the story of a movie. If his life were a movie and he was telling me the plot. So that's how he worked. And that really worked well for him because it kept him focused, kept me focused. And it also gave the book the kind of feeling I wanted, which was a very cinematic. I wanted people to feel when they were reading the book that they were watching a movie. And I've gotten a lot of feedback that's how people feel about it, which makes me it's very gratifying to me. So that was, it's still going on. I mean, it's Great Gardens, a story that never ends. We're turning it into to a TV series, fingers crossed. I've been working with a great production company, some great guys, and we've been, pitching it. But, there's such a little thing called the writer's strike right now, which I absolutely support. I'm a writer. I'm a union person. You go, WGA. I'm going to pick it myself in solidarity with them. So it was kind of, everything's on pause right now, but, I know it'll happen, and I think it'll be amazing because Jerry's story, it's so much more than Grey Gardens. Jerry's a gay man, by the way, P.S. I mean, I don't know if that's a surprise to anybody, but, and he was closeted for many, many, many years. So it's a story about not only coming to terms with his sexuality and his experiences, but it's about, I would like to say, it's like accepting your identity. For many years, he ran away from his identity as the Marble Faun. He wouldn't go anywhere near it. And then he learned what joy the Grey Gardens gives people, and he embraced it. So it's about embracing your true self. It's about going home. It's about the family you create versus the family that you were born into, and what, finding your tribe, if you will. And so I always feel like it's so much more than Grey Gardens. Grey Gardens is the centerpiece, but it's a whole life. So really excited. It was an incredible experience. Still happening.
Well, I only got to read a sample chapter so far, so I'm looking forward to reading the whole thing. And like I said, fingers crossed on the television show. That would be amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's on Audible too. I mean, I don't know if I'm a huge Audible books, streaming books on. We just call them books on tape. I'm a big Audible person, and I record it. It was a thrill of my life to record it. I play Jerry in it because I'm like, hello. Lily Edie said something very funny one time when they were talking to her about, because producers would come to Grey Gardens and want to film them and do a Hollywood version of Grey Gardens, and Edie would turn them down flat. I think one producer said he wanted Julie Christie to play Edith Beale, and Edie said, I almost went mad. She said, Julie Christie playing Edith Beale. If anybody's going to play Edith Beale, it's going to be Edith Beale. And, and in a way, with the documentary Grey Gardens, that's exactly what happened. So that's the way I felt about it. I'm like, if anybody records this book, it's going to be me. Jerry didn't want to do it. It would have been Jerry, but Jerry didn't want to do it. So I said, it's going to be me. So yeah, it's fun.
And you even had Albert do the forward or the introduction for it, which I think is very cool.
Talk about, getting in there in the nick of time. Yeah, Albert, that's why I meant this book went on for a long time. When we started the book, Albert was very much alive, and Jerry and I would hang out at Maisels Institute, and we would talk to Albert, and Albert adored Jerry. He was a sweet, sweet man. And thankfully, yes, he wrote the introduction, and then he passed away a couple years later. So I'm so glad that we were able to do that with him. Yeah.
Magnificent project, and then fingers crossed we get to see the television thing soon.
Yeah, please. be
We're
great.
running out of time, so let's go ahead and wrap this up with your work with the LGBT Center in LA. I mean,
Sure.
it's an amazing organization. We're in Pride Month, and they made it through this entire Dodger kerfuffle.
Yes.
I think with their head and shoulders above everyone else in it, along with everything, with their great support for the sisters.
Yeah.
Talk about what your role is with the organization, what it means to you, and what do you have coming up in the future?
Wow, that's a lot. Well, yes, thanks for mentioning the Dodgers thing, because that has been obviously topic A at work, and how wonderfully our CEO Joe Hollendonor negotiated that, brokered that treaty, if you will, between the Dodgers and the sisters, who are incredible people. I know a couple of them, and they are the most wonderful, giving, incredible people. They're charities. The reason they exist is because they ministered to AIDS patients when the real nuns wouldn't do it. So, hello, Catholic Church. I'm not going to get all that way, but, that's why they exist. So they turn around and say they're making fun of you. No, they're doing the work that you should have done, Penguin, but you didn't. I'm going to get letters. So the center is an incredible place.
Bill are a good match. I can see where you and Bill match.
Yeah. The center is an incredible organization. I've worked there twice. My initial experience with the center was AIDS Life Cycle, which, for anybody who doesn't know, happens in 2 weeks now. We're doing it in 2 weeks. Is a 7-day bike ride, not race, ride, that begins in San Francisco and ends in Los Angeles. So you start in San Francisco on a very cold Sunday morning at about 6 a.m. and you, God willing, end up in Los Angeles 7 days later. And you ride down some of those beautiful coastal countryside. California's an incredibly beautiful state. So I did AIDS Life Cycle. It's funny that you mentioned that show I did for the Here Network. It had stopped, and I was just hitting brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. And I thought, I have to do something to shake up my life. I got to change this energy. When you don't like the story, change the story. So I, on a whim, signed up for this. I know I used to ride a bike as a kid, but I didn't have a bike. I didn't have anything. And I signed up on a whim and found myself in the freezing cold in San Francisco, getting ready to ride 7 days to Los Angeles. I don't know how I managed it. I got to tell you, all I know is it was the most incredible experience of my life. And I've had some really cool experiences. It was life-changing. And I just thought, I have to be a part of this in some way. I have to be. It's just, get outside of yourself, Maietta. Think about other people and how you can be of service. Again, there's that word, like the sisters, being of service. And I worked for the organization for a couple of years. I had to take a brief hiatus because my parents were sick. And I just came back to the center because I knew I had more to do. And now I work in development, which is basically fundraising, which is basically asking people for money. And I don't have a lot of things in my wheelhouse that aren't film related, but I'm pretty good at getting money for people. So I have to admit, it's something's in my wheelhouse I feel pretty good about doing. Because it's such an amazing cause. Everything. It's an amazing organization. I mean, we have a huge youth center. We have 3 incredible senior centers. LGBT seniors are growing exponentially. I mean, these baby boomers, it's incredible. And we don't have enough housing for them. What are we going to do? So it's so important. I love this organization. I feel it has my heart. My heart will always be with show business, to be perfectly honest. But this center has a huge chunk of my heart. And I love what I do. And I'm not riding the bike in 2 weeks, because AIDS Life Cycle is actually happening again in 2 weeks. I'm working the event. I'm on safety. I'm in a Prius. So no more bike rides for me for 7 days. But I'm excited about it because it's a great event.
Well, they do some amazing events all through, with fundraising. I've had so many great friends of mine and guests on the show. Tom Goss is a huge participant in it. My friend Colin Andrews has written a couple books, has done it. I mean, everybody's done it, so that I know. And it's just such a life-changing experience. I have to lose about 100 pounds before I get my happy butt on a bike for that many days. But
well, the amazing thing about it is, Scott, is that you can be there. We have participants from 18 to 80. We have people who are in all kinds of shape. I mean, it's not a race. You know, you're not trying to get to LA first. It's a ride. You're supposed to, and you stop every 10 miles and take a break, and then you stop. You know, so yeah. I hear what you're saying. It's a challenge. I'll tell you that right now. It's a challenge, but it's the most worthwhile thing I really feel I've ever done in my life.
That's amazing. I'd be a great van spotter, I think. I could probably do great following behind in the van, but
that's a job. Hey, you're being of service.
I'm telling you. Tony Maietta, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Left of Str8 Show. I mean, we have so much more to talk about. We're going to have you back on, but thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure. It's been a joy to talk to you, Scott. Thank you for having me on.
And do me a favor, give everyone your website once again so they can find the book and they can find these videos and everything else.
Thank you.
Upcoming appearances.
Yes, it's my name, but there's a dash. So it's Tony-Maietta.com. If you just go to TonyMaietta.com, you go to .com. If you just go to TonyMaietta.com, you go to my cousin's website. Don't do that. It's Tony-Maietta.com. And it's all there. The book's there. The links to the videos are there.
What's he doing taking your son today?
You know, he's always that guy. I'm telling you. He lives in the South Bay too. So I'm just like, come on, dude. Funny. You know, you're a graphic artist. You really need, but no shade. No shade.
There you go. Well, we will have you back on the show very soon. You can be our resident historian anytime something really big happens. I may have to pick your brain a little bit up.
Be fun. I would love that.
All right, my friend. Well, we will play a little 5 questions with Tony. Be sure to look for that next Tuesday. And I appreciate you being on the show, my friend. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, stay on the line. Guys, you've been listening to the Left of Str8 Show right here on the Left of Str8 Radio Network. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Left of Str8 Show. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website, www.leftofstraightradio.com, for contests and other news and information. See you next week.